I'm Jeff Bond, and welcome back to the Steward Chair, where we bring business leaders insights that go beyond the balance sheet to help you build a more resilient and impactful organization. Today, I'm speaking with Jared Meyers, chair and co-founder of andCo Hospitality, a certified B Corp. We're unpacking the critical importance of reconciling the human cost of leadership with the financial demands of running a multi-brand empire. Jared shares a powerful story about witnessing the height of unethical practices during a family business dispute and how that pain became the catalyst for his commitment to the B Corp movement. This conversation is for every leader who's ever felt the friction of acting differently in the boardroom than they do in their personal life. We'll show you how to lead as one whole human and build businesses that reflects your truest values. But before we get started, if you haven't already, please follow the podcast for more insights on enduring leadership and consider sharing this with a founder who's currently navigating their own pivot to purpose. Let's get into it. Jared, welcome to the Steward Chair.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jeff.
It's such a pleasure. I just admire you so much as a leader, Jared, and I want to jump right in for our listeners because I know you have so many wonderful things to share about stewardship. For those who are unfamiliar with your background, what was that pivotal moment when you realized that being a force for good in the world was a model that could succeed where others had failed?
So I was coming out of a large business dispute involving family, involving a company that went through a Chapter 11 process, and really experiencing kind of the worst of business, like when everything goes the wrong way and you see unethical practices kind of at their height. And I started looking into other ways that business could be done because I knew that was certainly not a way that if business was going to be done that way, I didn't want to be a part of it. So I started doing a little bit of research and came across B Corps through that process and was fascinated that these types of organizations existed and started reading some books and speaking with CEOs of some B Corps and learned that there are some phenomenal companies out there that are well known, companies like Patagonia that are leading their industry, doing business in a very positive way, and that it wasn't just a marketing message as maybe I would have initially thought until I did my research and saw that, yeah, a business can do good and do well at the same time.
And for those who are unfamiliar, because not everyone who listens is a B Corp leader or even knows what a B Corp is, what does it take to become a B Corp? What did you have to go through?
So to become a B Corp, there's an impact assessment that a company must take, and it centers around transparency, third-party verification for the answers that you provide. The current version, which is being changed, requires a score of 80 or more. Going forward, that won't be required, but there will be bare minimum standards that businesses have to achieve in order to have the certification. But the general concept is that the business that holistically looks at its operations around positive impact. So that a business isn't just there to make money, but it's there to uplift. It's there to provide for all of its stakeholders in the process, not necessarily on an equal basis for each one, but on enough of a basis that it's not just doing well in one area and ignoring another area. And that's verified by B Lab as a nonprofit, and then it's transparently shared out so that consumers can see, hey, this business is more than marketing.
And different from the legal certification of like being a benefit corporation, right?
Correct. So
Yep.
many or most certified B Corps are also formed as legal benefit corporations, but that's not a requirement in every jurisdiction.
Yep. Excellent. So this podcast explores how great leaders build enduring businesses. Whether you founded your company or you've been entrusted to lead it, your role as a steward matters. And our goal here is always to inspire leaders to think beyond the short-term wins and lead with wisdom, integrity, long-term impact, and really build a company that lasts. So we've talked about stewardship together as a long-term responsibility, but you also talk about its daily cost. So what does that trade-off look like for you, Jared?
So I think a lot of people, when they hear that question, they think of, oh, what are the costs of being sustainable, responsible? Okay, I'm paying a living wage. That's more expensive. Okay, I want to be carbon neutral. I have to invest in renewable energy or maybe carbon offsets. And then they just say, what is the ROI of that? And there is use in that, and that is necessary in business. But I think one of the elements that, or at least for me, that gets largely left out with that is that, we come into the business world as people, as humans, and um, when we enter the business world and we act in a way that is different than how we are as individuals on a daily basis, there's a cost to that. There's a cost to feeling like a fraud. There's a cost to not being able to sleep well. There's a cost to feeling like this world's all messed up, but I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing because I don't know what else to do. That doesn't feel very good. There's no excitement, in your day, because you kind of know I'm going into work and I'm going to be a different person because I need to. And so, for me, very, on a very like personal answer, I think the costs of not doing business in this way are so much greater than any other potential costs that are financial. Because life isn't just about the finance side. It's about the feeling side. Like, why do we do this? I mean, the truth is, the reason I want to have a stable income is because it makes me feel better. It's driven by my feelings. It's not driven by me wanting to say, look at my bank account, look at what I own. I mean, that's the furthest thing from what I care about. So I think the cost is more, what is the human toll of not doing business a certain way? But I get a lot of people say, yeah, but you need to make the business and financial argument. And that those can be made. I mean, we show that. It's just that every decision that you make in the terms of being responsible doesn't always have an immediate ROI that you can look at. And I think you have to step back and say, yeah, but is this going to make me feel more excited to go to work tomorrow? And I'm going to therefore make better decisions and drive this company in a better direction. And if that works on me, is that not also working on our employees and our colleagues? And the answer is yes, it is. So you're just getting, I think, people at their best when you have a business model framed around this.
Love that. Where and how has that shown up in your story as a business leader?
Um, So from the very beginning, it was motivation. So I talked a little bit about the struggles I had gone through from the past kind of business and family disputes, and I was very disillusioned just with business in general, and didn't want to be a part of it. So I would say that if I hadn't found this type of business, I probably wouldn't be in the business. I'd be in some other form um, of how I operate in life. But then even within, the business beyond me, I see it in my colleagues. I mean, their enthusiasm. These are not easy times to be a human. And I mean, there's a lot going on in the world right now. And so our colleagues spend the majority of their hours with us at work. And it's if they can't get motivation and drive through what's going on at work, they're going to struggle more, which means our business is going to struggle. So we see that. We see our employees pushing harder because they believe in the larger mission. They don't look at it as, oh, I'm just going to make sure guests are enjoying their vacation. That's only one element of it. They're looking at it as, I know what we're driving towards, and if this company is successful, we're more likely going to achieve that. So I see it most showing up in the people around me and really feeling like um, they'd rather be nowhere else.
Jared, you talked about how many people believe stakeholder capitalism is dead. Maybe it's out of fashion in today's political and socioeconomic landscape. For those who are unfamiliar with even the phrase stakeholder capitalism, let's give them some clarity on that if you don't mind. But also, like, how do you pitch the business case for doing good to those leaders who are skeptical in your leadership circles, Vistage groups, larger forums where people who maybe aren't involved with the B Corp movement or conscious capitalism, are really questioning your motive and is there a good business case for this? So let's start with, what is stakeholder capitalism to you?
So, stakeholder capitalism versus maybe a traditional capitalism that somebody call exploitive, um, is that it looks at all stakeholders. It's holistic. So it's when I operate my business and move forward, is it rewarding only one stakeholder or all stakeholders? And yeah, it's easy to, if you're very short term and focus, to say, well, I'm just going to make money for the shareholders. That would be like one version of capitalism. The other ones are like, hey, how do we uplift our employees in the process? How do we regenerate the environment as we go through this? How do we make sure that our community feels part of this and wants us to actually be in business and to be here? And so you start looking at that, and stakeholders go further. Each company can define it a bit differently. Some that have massive supply chains, that's going to be a big stakeholder. But so you look at who is impacted by the decisions that we make as a business, and does our business lift those groups up or not? And what can we do about that? So that's stakeholder capitalism, and um, the concept of is stakeholder capitalism, dead right now? I mean, I don't think that being a good human is ever going to go out of style. Even though it's odd because some of the things that have been popularized in this last year or so feel like we've said, no, you can kind of put being good human aside because this is more important. That's garbage. that's I think that's just a short-term window of something that we're going through, and just because we're hearing some of that in media right now, and with the certain companies that are out there, you're not hearing that from the committed companies. There are still so many companies that are committed to this version of business and acting. We talked about certified B corporations. They're not the only ones, but that's an easy one. If you're like, well, where can I look? You're likely going to find if someone's got that logo or certification that they are doing this. But I think that once we lose touch with how important it is to have humanity, what's the purpose of humans versus computers ruling the world? I mean, like, if we want life to be about humans and life, then we need to make our decisions in that way. And when you do that, you tend to find that you make stakeholder based decisions because a shareholder is a human, right? Your employees are humans. Your supply chains are businesses run by humans. I mean, like, you just have to continue, I believe, to make these sorts of decisions. And therefore, stakeholder capitalism will never be dead. I think what is dead is some people were throwing around that term and not being as authentic behind what they were trying to do. There was like a popularity to be like, I'm part of that movement. And a lot of companies jumped on board that weren't authentically doing so. And so they were so happy when they felt they could back away from it. I don't think it will ever go away. It may have different language that describes it. Right now, not a lot of people are saying, I'm doing stakeholder capitalism. They're using other words to say it, but they're still doing it.
So I think you've made a great business case, Jared, for stakeholder capitalism for the long term for those non-believers, maybe that are trying to be convinced that having a stakeholder mindset makes sense for them. For those who are already bought in and have been for years, like yourself, to what stakeholder capitalism looks like, the importance of it, the sustainability of that in terms of creating long-term enduring businesses. How do you encourage them in a time of turmoil and upheaval and kind of attacks on the ideas of stakeholder capitalism to keep doing the work, to fight through it, and to know that they're doing the right thing all along? And maybe on the flip side, what kind of like wisdom are you looking for in that to continue to fuel your mission?
It's a great question. So there's been a lot of challenges that every business and every person has faced in their life. And challenges usually pass. Not all of them do. This is another challenging time for us. This is not a forever time. This is just a challenging time. um, those of us that are committed to this because it feels better to do business this way, and we also believe that it does have that right financial return associated with it, want to stay committed to this. It's not a matter of like, no one that's doing this wants to leave. They just want to feel like, well, if I'm going to continue doing this, is there a wall I'm going to hit, or are we going to move past this? um, we're going to move past this, and the more that there is a community around this, I think the more that it helps in doing so. And so for me, it does help talking with other business leaders that practice this style of business and to see what they're still staying committed to. Um, One of my benefits, I have a few different hats, which people will probably see in my bio, that I'm in a few different business lines. I love actually getting ideas from the different businesses I'm a part of because it gives me confidence to carry it back like across the board. Not that that's not always as obvious to others who are just kind of maybe in one lane, but I'm hearing that business leaders want to stay committed to this. They just want to know that there is some concern for safety in some things that we do. And that's why I think some languages change and some people have shifted. But also, I've seen in many instances of people coming together, fighting, whether it's for policy, whether it's fighting even in lawsuits for things that are being attacked that they believe in, that they want to continue doing in business. Um, and they're just staying committed to their values. So I guess from my personal standpoint, I continue to look for other business leaders that are staying committed to this, how they're staying committed to this, finding ways that I can learn from them to pull into my own businesses. But I'm also finding that's out there. So I guess I'm not feeling lost in this. There's days that I feel down, but I'm not feeling lost.
Yeah, very encouraging. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'd like to talk a little bit about a strategic shift that you've made personally because you've done a big rebrand, and I know in business rebranding is not an easy feat. Like you're literally changing everything, your back end systems, your face to the public, and everything. So, how did that move that you made, being a stakeholder capitalist, how did that kind of prioritize your long-term vision over the short-term gain, and a little bit about like the why, behind it all?
So previously, we had one brand, Legacy Vacation Resorts, which we are very proud of. It was a great, B Corp, doing a lot of good work, and it's difficult only having one brand across multiple hotels that have different quality levels and have different budgets attached to them for what they're able to do. So behind the scenes, they all have the same commitments. They all were committed to living wage. They're all committed to being carbon neutral. Um, and we're doing all that right work. But certain resorts had the ability to go further, but were constrained by being part of this one brand. So we tried to envision what could we do that could allow us to make as much progress as possible in each individual resort. And the concept came up that we had to probably create more than one brand in what we were doing. So we worked with an agency and started to think about what would be the right way to break this up. And we came about on ultimately four brands. So we have a parent brand, andCo Hospitality. And then we have three other brands, Legacy Vacation Resorts remains. Then we have the Fold Hotels and the Local. And with that separation, it allows each individual brand to basically create its own personality, but also to go deeper into certain values that that personality and that location and those employees care about. So all of them will still have the bare minimum B Corp standards across them. There's no backing off of any of that. But you take a brand like the Local that we have, clearly in its name, it's going to have more of a localism focus because of its name being the Local. And we can do that where maybe all of the resorts would have struggled to do that to a certain level. And we don't have to say, well, now you can't do that, but no, now you can do that. So the Local can have a commitment to, what percentage of its supply chain is going to be in the local vicinity, what percentage of its profits is it going to retain within that local community and revenues, and which drives the local economy. Um, so doing this is going to make each one of those brands much greater in the whole than if we had just been one. And then ultimately, from a guest perspective, you're going to have guests who are more likely to have the resort meet their expectations because the quality levels are a little bit different, across all of these. And generationally, as as travel demand shifts, some of our brands will work better within certain generations, as in other generations. Some will have a little bit more technology, driven. Some people hate tech. We have the Local as an example, is a full tech brand. It already was the place that we bought. Um, there is no staff at that property. But oddly enough, while I'm not the type of traveler that enjoys traveling in 100% tech environments, our head of IT said, I love it. I don't have to talk to anyone at the front desk. So, different brands appeal to different people. So it allows us to be more than just what one brand could offer. And at the end of the day, it's driven by having greater cumulative impact across all of the brands.
I love that. For the business leader that's listening right now that maybe feels, hey, it may not be working right now. What we have in our brand portfolio or our one, existing brand isn't really hitting the mark. What was your process and what gave you the courage, to make that change? Like, cause that again, it's a big decision. So like what gave you kind of that conviction, and maybe would be helpful for another business leader listening right now to hear when it comes to getting unstuck in that moment?
So, in any business leaders that are comfortable doing kind of multi-year forecasts forward, um, can look at kind of what can. Of course, it's hard to say where we will really be in 5 years, but you can use your best assumptions to predict where your business is going to be, and you look at different trends that come out from that. Whether that's a revenue trend, whether that's where costs are going, whether that's other dynamics affecting your business. And when you look at it over a longer term view, you're able to ask yourself, okay, is this something that we can fix with just tweaks here or there, or do we need to do some more significant changes? So that is a process that we did. And we've determined, even with assets that we have as a company, and that does tie to some of these brands, some of our assets may not be the right assets for us to have long term. I mean, if we own something and we can't achieve carbon neutrality with it on its own, that's a problem. We want to have resorts that are regenerative. If we can't achieve carbon neutrality on our own, that's going to be problematic for us. So we started saying, where do we want to be 5 years and 10 years from now versus where does our current way of operating take us? Can we get there with tweaks, or do we have to do more significant changes? Branding was one part of that. The truth is, there's a lot of other decisions that we've made too that will come out over the next few years, but it's all driven by, we're going to achieve the impact that we want as a company by doing that. And sometimes it's just repositioning. It's looking at it as, so there's a little bit of asset management, you could say, and happening too. Like we might have a property and we say, yep, that's a hotel right now, but long term, that may not be the right market for a hotel. And that's not us to make that decision. That's kind of what the market is deciding. So can we be smart enough to plan now for that instead of get to the point and say, oh, we just got to close that hotel because the market doesn't want a hotel there.
And is that something you were able to accomplish with your existing leadership team and board, or did you have to bring in any outside parties or counsel? Like, how did you work through that together without it becoming so personal to the brand that you built and kind of detaching yourself and becoming a little bit more objective in that decision making?
I would say the majority of it was internally handled. From a branding perspective, we did use Nice and Serious, who's the B Corp out of the UK, who was great to work with. When it comes to kind of these larger strategic changes, we have some consultants that we work with that have really strong industry experience that have helped us kind of assess that and compare this more of a benchmark against the hotel industry. Um, when it comes to just impact benchmarking, most of that's internal, but we are using the B Corp framework. I mean, I guess I should add that plug that, we talk about B Corp a lot. A company doesn't have to be a B Corp, but the frameworks that B Corps use is available to anyone. And what's amazing by that is because if you really do care about a certain impact area, you can use that impact assessment to see how you compare with others in your industry or otherwise, and therefore learn how you can do better in it. You don't have to be a B Corp to do that. You just have to take the assessment.
It's really helpful. I want to step back for a minute to your leadership journey because we really do, for our listeners now, we always look through the lens of business leadership as stewardship. And I think about a lot of the inflection points that you've already shared. I'd really love to hear if there's just like one story from your leadership journey that has really helped clarify your role as a steward in the company that maybe still gives you chills when you remember it.
So if I go back to kind of that maybe foundational event that kind of launched me in the B Corp direction, um, I'd mentioned that the business I was a part of was going through Chapter 11. So I remember sitting in the courtroom. We had submitted a plan. So for those that don't know, when you're in Chapter 11, that's called a reorganization. It's a type of bankruptcy. And in there, you're able to submit a plan to the court. And if the plan meets certain criteria, the court approves it, and you can basically come out of bankruptcy. And you have a window that you can do that in. And so we had followed all the steps properly with that business, but there was litigation ongoing at the same time. Family members that were very adverse. And we submit a plan that day, and suddenly my father and several others had submitted this uh, alternate plan, which they weren't supposed to be able to do under the kind of the laws of bankruptcy, but they did. And the judge gave them time to at least make the presentation. Yeah, so they go forward, they do this whole thing, and I start hearing, wow, oh, my uncle's now involved. Oh my gosh, they've gotten a bank involved in this. Oh my gosh, they've gotten a few other business people that I knew that were involved in this. And it was the only time ever in that courtroom where I thought, this is not going to go well. In that moment, I thought, um, even though I knew we had the legal sound ground for where we were going forward, I'm like, this is going to go the other a different direction. We weren't prepared for this, to be happening, and I started thinking about, how is this possible? And as I saw, like, I visually saw greed at work, because what was being proposed wasn't achievable, and it wasn't good for anyone except for the people that were proposing it. And ultimately it didn't get accepted. I mean, so obviously in those moments, sometimes it's hard for you to step back and think like, well, this judge has, seen these things many times. They're going to make the right choice on this. But in that moment, I wasn't feeling that, and I was really seeing how um, I think business at its worst can happen, on how partnerships can come together that are greed motivated and nothing else. And just really being so opposed to that, and and being scared, because not knowing what was going to happen there in that, in that moment of it moving forward. And I mention that because when it was fully resolved and all said and done, and our plan was approved, to go forward, I knew that if I was going to stay in business, I just had to do it totally different. I did not want to be associated or a part of the type of business that I saw others in my family and others were a part of. And it just was very crystal clear, I guess, just in kind of how it all played out. So I guess I don't forget that, but it also, um, maybe one other piece to add would be, when one goes through the very real possibility that they're going to lose an awful lot. So while that was only a business bankruptcy, if that had failed, my life would be quite different, and that's a whole very long story behind that. Um, but when that bankruptcy was over, I had to go through a rebuilding mentally and business wise, and that's where I had to make some of those real serious decisions. Who do I want to be? What do I want this business to be? How do I do those in alignment with one another? And it was a perfect moment for me to realize that, again, a stakeholder capitalism method, a B Corp driven method, a holistic positive impact driven business was the only way that I could do that. And if that wasn't available to me, I wasn't going to do it any other way.
Hmm. I imagine that was a painful time, but it also seems to have turned pain to purpose. So are you thankful, that you went through it, or you wish you hadn't, looking back?
I'm thankful that it allowed me to shift my life trajectory the way that I have. It's hard to be thankful for, I guess, uh, in any pain at a family level in life. So, but the comfort I have is that that wasn't something I chose. It was just something that I had to live through and endure. And then when I was given a choice, I feel that I'm quite happy with the choice I made to go on my current direction.
I'm happy you are too. I've had so many positive interactions with you as a result, so it's impacted my life in a lot of ways, and how you've led and been a light in the world and in our community. How do you continue to take care of yourself despite all the political macroeconomic climate, all the uncertainty we talked about already? How do you stay focused on the mission, but more importantly, just like put your oxygen mask on every day and make sure that self-care is an important part of this? Because if the leader isn't caring for themselves, it's really hard for them to care for those that they're leading.
It's a great point. Um, I think it starts with health and fitness. At least, for me, I generally have a good diet. I've always been a gym or sports, person, um, and that isn't just for the being fit element of it, but right, you get good blood flow, you have more oxygen. Um, it helps when problems come my way, that I'm not as reactive, that I'm a little bit more calm, going through those. So for me, it starts there. I regularly do therapy. I find that the same way one would hire a personal trainer in the gym to build more muscles, a therapist is the same thing for your mind. I mean, people use therapy in different ways. Sometimes you can get that through business groups. I mean, there's other mechanisms, but I have found the therapy angle to be most valuable. And I happen to talk with someone who has a strong Eastern philosophical spiritual background when I do that. So it kind of combines both of those elements. Um, and I don't know, I find that it helps me see things with being a little bit less serious, a little bit more curious. And so as like things happen, that a reaction would be like, that's horrible and that's the worst, I can react slower to it and really kind of think through like what I can do as a result of it's happening, or just observe in a moment and not feel like I have to react or do anything else. So I think all of that helps. Certainly being in a business where I care about the people I work with and they care back, that has a very natural element. So it's you kind of have each other's backs. I mean, I don't think people really think through that in the stakeholder, capitalism sense. Like when we went through COVID and we had shut down our hotels and we had to reach out to our suppliers and say, "Would you work with us? We can't write you checks the same way." When you already had good relationships with them because you were treating them well, they're like, "Yes." And so, like, some of the things are like it's a structure and a preparation for when things are getting hard. They don't get as hard because you have people in your corner. So I think there's a lot of different elements that you can use to kind of prepare yourself for when the world is difficult like this, how you're not fighting against everyone in the process, and that you actually have more people that are part of your support group than not.
Well, Jared, this has been such a great conversation. As always, a lot of great takes for our listeners who are all business leaders. They're CEOs, presidents, founders, or aspiring entrepreneurs. I want to give you the last word, rapid fire. If they were to remember one key insight from our conversation today, what would you hope it will be?
I think it would be just let humanity, the best parts of humanity, guide your decisioning. If you continue to do that, I truly believe you're going to be successful in business, but even more importantly, you're going to be a happier and more fulfilled person. That's going to make you a better business person. That's going to make it easier to go through life. That is really where we need to center. And even though I sometimes think we need to talk about like all life, I think when you're looking at the best parts of humanity, you are caring about all life that's out there, and you think for the benefit of all and not just a few.
My sincere thanks to Jared for joining us today. His insights on the ROI of feeling good about how you do business truly are a testament to the power of values-driven leadership. And now here's your steward's call. It's the one key moment I think you can take away from our conversation and put into practice today. How about you perform a humanity audit on your next big decision? Before you sign off, just ask yourself, does this decision reward all my stakeholders, my employees, my community, my legacy, or is it just feeding the bank account? And as Jared said, let the best parts of humanity guide the pen. Remember that building a legacy is not a future event, it's a daily practice. So what you do today shapes the impact you leave behind. And we'd be so grateful if you found value in today's conversation to take a moment to follow the Steward Chair wherever you get your podcasts. It really is the best way to ensure you'll never miss an episode. And to help us grow this community, please share this episode with a leader that you respect. A final thank you to our incredible production team, executive producers, Quentin and Thomas, and to our managing editor, Daniel. They really are the true stewards behind this show, and I'm your host and researcher, Jeff Bond. And with that, now go and be a leader worth following.